really try to do here at Amherst Live is work with people who live in the town, people like you, people like me. We're not professional actors or performers, but we all have stories to tell. We all have lots of experience and interesting thoughts, and we like to work with people and help them shape those thoughts and get them up here on stage so that we can all find out what our neighbors have been thinking about and benefit from all that they have learned. It's just very weird that it's such a resource. All the people in this audience are this enormous resource, and it's just criminal to leave it untapped. So that's kind of what we're here to do. And I just want to say as a reminder that the people you're going to see tonight, we have two talkers for you. They are just like you and me. They're not professional. So I'm going to ask you just to be generous to them. Give them your ears. And first we're going to bring out Lisa dePiano. She is a certified permaculture teacher, designer. She's also a regional planner. And she's going to talk to us about one of aspect of the town, one of the most ubiquitous aspects of the town, but in a way kind of the least distinguished, our roads. So please join me in welcoming Lisa.
Thanks, Oliver. So I come from a giant Italian family. My grandparents had 7 kids. They were Catholic. And when my grandfather came to this country, he worked for 10 years, laying brick, laying concrete, framing houses, whatever he could do to save up enough money to send back for my grandmother and his 7 children. And when they were in Italy, they didn't need to have driver's license. And when they came to this country, they were either too old or too stubborn to get driver's license. So that was one of the criteria that my grandfather considered when he was finding his new home. They settled just outside of Philadelphia, at the edge of a train line, right next to a park, a block away from a supermarket and a school. And when they came over, they brought a little slice of the old country with them. Soon, my grandfather had turned over a patch of garden in the yard, and he had cucumbers and tomatoes and peppers and onions and fresh herbs growing. They planted a cherry tree and hung a grape arbor over the empty driveway. A large clothesline hung in the back of the yard. By the time the duplex next to my grandfather's house became available, my father jumped at the opportunity to buy it, much to my mother's chagrin. And a few years later, I popped out. My father had 7 brothers and sisters, and they also married and had children. And before I knew it, I had 12 cousins, all within 5 years and a 15-minute drive of one another. And when we were younger, every Wednesday during the summer was play day. And play day was a time where each of the aunts and uncles would take a turn watching all the children. I still remember my aunts and uncles, Uncle Caesar, Uncle Gus, and Aunt Bombine, huddled in the back of the yard on a picnic table, eating and chatting, while my cousins and I took free range over the yard. And when it was our turn to host, we would spill out into the park behind our house, mixing with the neighborhood kids in epic games of freeze tag and kick the can. Sometimes we would even wander to the edge of the street where there was a small patch of forest. It wouldn't be until dark that my mom would call us back home for dinner. I think it was middle school when everything changed. Suddenly, it wasn't so cool to have your underwear flapping on the breeze on the clothesline. And I couldn't understand why my aunts and uncles would travel all the way to New Jersey and pick bushels and bushels of tomatoes and spend 3 whole days canning tomato sauce. Why couldn't we go to the supermarket like normal people? Normal people whose dads wore suits to work, and they lived in the suburban cul-de-sacs. You know, the places where they cut down all of the trees and then paid homage to them by naming the neighborhoods after them? Places like Elmwood Terrace and Maplewood Estates. They all seem to have 2-car garages, central air conditioning and big screen TVs, 3 bedrooms. They didn't have gardens out back, and definitely no underwear in the clothesline. When I was old enough to go to college, I went to school much in a college town like Amherst. And it was there that I got to know small town life, Within about 5 to 10 minutes, my friends and I could easily walk into town. We enjoyed restaurants and cafes, took up yoga, biking. Life was good. Every time I would come back home from break, something had changed. It became a regular topic of dinner conversation. My mom would say, "Did you know that the old pumpkin farm went out?" My dad would chime in about the Valley Forge Music Hall going out. That was the first place that I saw my first concert. It was Tiffany and New Kids on the Block. Entire memories erased. And what was in their places? Another super box store, big supermarket, bank, hairdresser. But we now, within a 10-minute drive, had our choice of about 6 supermarkets. Only, my mom would avoid going out between the hours of 4 and 8 for fear of gridlock. As we become adults, some people want to go back and fix their families. I wanted to fix the roads. I came to Amherst to go to UMass to study regional planning, and I fell in love with the town of Amherst. It had everything on the good design checklist: street trees and sidewalks, mixed use downtown, the Jones Library, Puffer's Pond. But even in Amherst, our streets are still dominated by the car and the fire truck. Did you know, according to National Fire Code, that our streets have to be 20 feet wide? And that's not even including parking on either side. This makes for really wide streets that cars can just speed down. And when you really look at it, when you look at the statistics, according to the Center for Disease Control, in 2010, there is about 2,500 fire deaths compared to 40,000 road deaths. So our streets are really designed under the guise of safety. And if you look at it, it really affects our social lives as well. Do you know you can tell how many friends you have by how many cars go down your roads? According to the Congress of New Urbanism, if you have 2,000 cars going down your road, you have about 3 friends and 6 acquaintances. Once it goes up to 14,000, you're down to 0.09 friends and 3 acquaintances. Well, what if we didn't leave town design just to the developers and engineers? What if we designed to let our children be able to play safely in the streets? Or what if we designed for happiness? So I have a colleague who was also struggling with these same questions. And so he really wondered, what did our towns look like before the car really dominated? So he went on sort of a vision quest and traveled all over the world. He went to Asia, South America, and Europe, and visited villages, much like the ones my grandparents came from. And what he learned there was the streets. They were much more narrow, and they were meandering. They had a sense of mystery to them. You never know who you might bump into and go have a coffee or just sit on a stoop and really watch the world go by. So when he came back to his hometown of Portland, Oregon, he really wanted to see, could he turn his city into a network of villages? So he did what every great organizer does. He started with food. He gathered his neighborhood with a weekly potluck. And soon these potlucks grew. And as the potlucks grew, people began to know each other. They actually began to talk about things that mattered to them. And what they talked about was how they wanted safe places for their kids to play, how they wanted to have a sense of community and know what was going on in their neighborhood. And it was there that they hatched a brilliant idea. They were going to take back the one public space that they still had, the street. They pulled out into the intersection of their neighborhood, and right there in the center of the intersection, they painted a great mural about the history of their neighborhood. On one corner, they constructed a big bulletin board where they would post notices of the next potluck and new businesses that had come up, owned by local residents. On the other corner, they went out and they got all their old windows and boards, and they constructed a fabulous children's playhouse. All of this right on the road. And soon, things started to change. People started coming out of their houses, talking to one another. And other neighborhoods wanted to have their intersections repaired as well. And soon, they realized that not only did they have this great community center, but traffic started to slow down. they would see people gathered in the intersections in all the bright colors, and they'd kind of slow down to see what was going on. Not only did cars slow down, but people's sense of safety built up. They began to have real relationships. And they decided that they weren't going to move to the next hottest town. They wanted to stay right where they were. So what about Amherst? What is our collective vision? If you could design your own neighborhood, what would be in it? Maybe you're concerned about your streets flooding every spring, and you want to de-pave bump outs and plant these fabulous rain gardens with trees and flowers that would soak up all of that water, provide habitat for birds and insects, maybe even a fresh piece of fruit. Maybe you want to have a little poetry corner on the side of your neighborhood where people could just write random notes of poetry to one another. Or maybe an edible tour marking out the best apples and blueberries and raspberries along the roads and on public property. Also, if you're motivated, Town Hall is accepting applications. They're due on Tuesday, February 4th, and you only need one signature. It can even be your own. So don't leave town design up to the developers and to the engineers. We know that we get roundabouts and speed humps. This is your town. Gather your neighbors. Make it a place your kids want to come back to. Thank you.